When I speak in the West, in Germany or England, I say that our military personnel order drones and weapons as if in a store. That is, they go to a website and choose what they need to destroy the enemy. On Amazon for drones. And this is very surprising for the Western military because they do not understand how this can be done. My explanation is very simple. Each unit has its own task to perform, and they know best what they need to carry out this task most effectively.
Ukraine's domestic drone industry is one of the most striking features of its development during full-scale wartime. The needs to make up for relatively low manpower in comparison to the Russian invaders have resulted in Ukraine robotizing and automizing many of their processes of the battlefield, maybe none more notable than drones. The emergence of major players within the Ukrainian drone industry was obviously soon to follow. One of these is TAF Drones. This is maybe the largest drone company or drone producer within Europe. Consequently, I'm very glad to welcome Oleksandr. Can you tell us a little bit about how you started TAF, how you started your business in logistics before that, and how did it happen that you are now in Europe?
It's a long, short story. On the one hand, it was quite fast because we were developing quite fast. On the other hand, there were certain steps that we took. On February 24th, when the full-scale invasion began, we did not think about creating a company that would deal with Miltech products. The first step we took was to get together with our top management and our team.
I'm sorry, but I'm always curious. What is your personal memory from that day when you found out that the full-scale invasion had begun on February 24th?
You know, it's an interesting story because I was sure that there would be a full-scale invasion and that it wouldn't be limited to the east of Ukraine. It would be a total invasion. In January, I gathered my top management. My main business is logistics, fuel imports and grain exports. I gathered my top management and said that we need to prepare for the war in Ukraine to begin. Since we are a logistics company, we have our own vehicles, our own low-loader trailers. We started transporting equipment for the 28th Brigade, for the 35th Brigade. These are Odessa-based brigades. At that time, our army had a high shortage of trucks, covered trucks, for transporting all kinds of cargo. There were a lot of complicated situations. For example, when we were delivering sand and concrete to near Mykolaiv, some colonel called us and told us to build defensive structures, but we are civilians. What do you mean to build defensive structures? We have no idea how this works. They drew diagrams on a sheet of paper showing us how to do it, how to lay out the defensive slabs and so on. And we did just that with our truck tractors. This was the first step. The second step was that we founded a charity organization, Wave 91, and began actively helping the military. What could we do? Well, first of all, since we had a strong logistical expertise, we began to transport rather complex things for the military. Meaning what unfortunately in 2022 was officially forbidden to sell to Ukraine. These are some thermal imagers, high-resolution cameras, and some communication equipment. We exported them from China, from Europe, and imported them into Ukraine. And sometime at the end of 2022, I met the National Guard of Ukraine, one of the brigades that is located in Odessa. We had joint combat operations in the Zaporizhia direction, where, having seen it for myself whilst taking part in combat operations, I understood how drones work and what they can be used for. At that time, it was only Chinese drones which were called wedding drones, like Mavic and DJI. But even at that time, they showed great results.
And when was that?
At the end of 2022, in December 2022. Starting in 2023, we began to transport components and together with the National Guard to assemble FPV drones. It was not a commercial story. We brought in the components for free, handed them over for free, and started working with the men and women serving in the National Guard to assemble the drones. Step by step, we started to put them to use and identify the improvements that needed to be made. But it was all not on an industrial scale. Plus, at that time, military operations and kill zones were so small that it was possible to fly with an ordinary FPV drone for 5 to 7 kilometers, and this was enough to harm the enemy. Our first attempt to make a large-scale factory for the production of FPV drones was in August 2023. It was not planned to be commercial. We were collecting donations, but it was unsuccessful. Why was it unsuccessful? Because about a month later, this factory was destroyed by our enemy. All the property was destroyed. This was in August 2023. About $2 million were invested. It was a pretty big blow for us. But at that moment, my team surprised me a lot. They said, "No, we can't give up halfway, so we will get up from the ashes like the phoenix and do everything over again." And we actually started doing it. At the end of 2023, FPV drones began to be used on a larger scale. Before, it was not systematized or centralized. Some units used them, like those that raised donations for them, or those with soldiers who had experience operating drones, FPV or ordinary drones, in civilian life. They used them, but it wasn't on a large scale. In November 2023, we decided to do it more consciously. We officially registered our company.
Tech Auto Fart South.
Да, це дуже дивна назва.
Yes, this is a very strange name. I'll tell you why. Because at that time I had a registered company for logistics. And when we decided that we needed to establish a company for drone production, we decided not to register a new one, but just add a form of activity to the existing one, because there was no time. Everything had to be done quickly. And that's how this strange name came about, which in short is TAF. This once again emphasizes that we didn't consciously go into commerce initially. We did not plan to build a business out of it. Everything started as charity. In fact, it continues to operate as a charity organization too. But as I was told at that time by the Ministry of Digital Transformation and the Ministry of Defense, we are doing a good job, but charity is impossible to scale, and it is necessary to develop systemic processes so that we can continue to improve, do research and development, and further grow in this direction. In March 2024, we received our first big contract for 150,000 drones. And quite frankly, I was feeling very nervous. Why? Well, first of all, I had never worked with the state. I had no experience of cooperating with the state. And everything I had heard about cooperating with the state was that it would be very difficult and there could be serious consequences. Nevertheless, as it happened in our case, it was very transparent, very fast, because at that time the Ministry of Digital Transformation was very focused on quickly supplying the troops with drones. Of course, it was scary. Why? Because at that time I had 30 to 50 people in my team. And when they came to me and said, "Can you make 150,000 drones?" I said yes. But you understand that I wasn't 100% confident because we did not have enough experience yet, first of all. But when I said yes and came to my team, I said, "Friends, look, we now have two options. Either we do it or there will be serious consequences." So we went through it. Then I found out that almost all manufacturers went through this. Because as you understand, before 2022, there were up to 10 companies in the Ukrainian militech industry that produced drones. And in general, the market was very closed. Thanks to the transformation made by our state, the Ministry of Digital Transformation, the Ministry of Defense, and the President's Office, they very much liberalized the miltech market. That is, everything became much simpler in terms of codification and scaling.
З точки зору кодифікації і масштабування.
And at first, was it all through the Ministry of Digital Transformation or the state
Yes,
special
through the State Special Communication
Service?
Service. It was relatively simple because it had to be done quickly. That is, whoever was able to fulfill a contract quickly and efficiently received this contract. There were no complicated tenders, procedures, etc. Why? Because, as I said, the main goal was to saturate the market with drones and create many companies that would compete with each other.
How did it feel when you successfully did it?
It felt different at different times because it was a huge responsibility. And of course, it didn't go without fuck-ups. Sometimes we had problems with the quality, I honestly admit this, but a lot of companies had problems with the quality. During scaling, unfortunately, this is a standard story. There were also moments when it was difficult for us to do it on time, but we did it. We felt this responsibility. We were constantly in contact with the military, corrected our mistakes, and learned. Nevertheless, the results showed that we were able to do it, and we started receiving other contracts. Since 2025, our state has changed its approach to procurement, and this is important. They made a combined system. There is centralized procurement through the Defense Procurement Agency and the State Special Communications Service, and there is decentralized procurement through the dot chain and e-points directly from military units. This was an important step for competition. That is, now the military can choose what they need. They can choose based on price or quality. They are free to choose which products to use. In essence, this is a marketplace. When I speak in the West, in Germany or England, I say that our military personnel order drones and weapons as if in a store. That is, they go to a website and choose what they need to destroy the
І
enemy.
вибирають, що їм потрібно для знищення ворога.
Amazon для дронів.
On Amazon for drones. And this is very surprising for the Western military because they do not understand how this can be done. My explanation is very simple. For a certain period of time, each unit has its own task to perform, and they know best what they need to carry out this task most effectively. This is the first thing. The second is that this creates very strong competition between the manufacturers. Because now they essentially work not for a single client, but with dozens or even hundreds of units with whom they need to negotiate separately. What does it mean to negotiate? It means creating a product that suits this particular unit. This is very difficult for us as manufacturers because if we used to have 7 products, now we have hundreds of them. What does this mean? One unit needs this kind of motor with this kind of connection. Another unit needs this kind of camera with this kind of telemetry. Another unit wants this specific kind of initiation board and so on. It was difficult for us to adapt to this because it requires significant logistical costs. It requires significant working capital because now you have to buy a lot of everything and you are not always sure that it will be relevant in a month or in 2 or 3 months. But on the other hand, our units began to increase their effectiveness. Because when they get the drones they want, they don't need to remake them later, think up some updates, upgrades, and so on. Therefore, this system, in my opinion, is very well balanced because it is combined. About 30 to 40 to 50% are centralized purchases. When we get an order for 100,000 drones from the state, we make them. And about 30 to 40 to 50% is a decentralized system where each unit orders 3 to 5,000 items with the specifications they need.
Саме тих специфікацій, які їм потрібні.
А це на сьогоднішній день.
Is this as of today?
Yes, that's how it is today.
Так і відбувається.
Ну, тобто, як вам... Якщо я можу...
If I can philosophize a little, I think that your success depends on logistics, but logistics depends on scaling. And scaling depends on specifications being the same. So when you can make 100,000 units of the same drone, if you need to make different configurations in one batch, this complicates the process. How do you deal with this?
First of all, we had to expand our staff quite a lot. Now 1,600 people work for us. Last year, it was no more than 1,000. This is due to the fact that now the production chain, the supply chain of the whole system has changed. That is, we have mass production where 30,000 to 40,000 drones are produced per month in one configuration. And there is, we call this a specific production, where no more than 50,000 per month can be produced because you need to constantly change your production process sheets. Yes, this greatly increases the cost, but relatively speaking, what does it mean? We can fight our enemy only in the context of asymmetric war. That is, we cannot fight with exactly the same resources as our enemy because we do not have such resources. Accordingly, we must be more effective. And if we calculate the cost per kill, that is, how much money we spend to destroy one enemy soldier, then we are much more effective than our enemy. The Ministry of Defense provides information about the effectiveness of drones. This is public information. When the new defense minister, Mikhailo Fedorov, gathered the military, he explained in great detail which drones are effective, how the effectiveness has increased, how to increase it, and so on. We understand that these steps lead to an increase in the effectiveness of our drones. But not only ours, in general, all drones on the market. Plus, this allows manufacturers to be more competitive because it is no longer the case that you received an order for half a year of 200,000 to 300,000 drones and then you just make them. You must constantly adapt and accordingly improve to stay in the market.
Відповідно, те, що це під умов війни, значить,
Considering that this is under wartime conditions, it means that you have certain security risks. Can you evaluate this situation? Under what risks do your factories operate?
Under very high risks. First of all, we currently have more than 12 locations where production takes place. Why 12? It's not because it is convenient for us, but because it is relatively safer. That is, if some location is destroyed, we will not lose all our capabilities. But from the point of view of the supply chain and production, this is a very difficult task because you have a lot of products and a lot of specifications. You have production in different locations where you have to transport everything. You have a lot of warehouses because you cannot keep the finished product at production facilities. This is also a diversification of risks. And in addition to all that, we used to deliver 30,000 drones per month to the Ministry of Defense warehouse. We just took them to a warehouse. Now we are transporting our drones along the entire front line because we have to deliver to each brigade or unit at their location. And this leads to additional costs and additional risks because we can make a delivery to a warehouse near the combat zone and it can get destroyed. We cannot tell the military that this is their problem, because these are our common problems. When the Russians destroy 1,000 drones, we bring them 1,000 drones for free, because we understand that the guys are counting on them and we have to provide them. Our initial spirit is charity. We started from this. Now, of course, we have a commercial structure that has its own goal.
Те, що про український мілтек
Our current goal is to make Ukrainian miltech known abroad. This is important. We talk a lot about it, we tell everyone about it, but now we have to turn it into real cases because there are not enough real cases yet.
Чим займаєтеся? А ви вже не...
What do you do now that you are no longer a CEO but an owner? What do you do abroad?
В кінці минулого року я прийняв рішення, що я...
At the end of last year, I decided to leave the position of CEO. Together with the board of directors, we appointed another CEO who fully meets the competencies that our company needs now. Why? Because my competence is in creating something new, to push, sometimes to implement creative chaos when the team works under pressure but delivers fast results. But this works during the startup period. That is, when the company has just been created and you just need to move quickly. After 2 years, we are now 2.5 years old, the company needs a different approach. The CEO should be an integrator, a system person who knows how to think through operational processes, not create additional value all the time. So we decided that the CEO is a person who can scale my achievements. And my task and my key results for 2026 are, first of all, to enter the international market and create a post-war business model. This is important. When the peace agreements are signed, when the war is over, it is critically important for me that we can scale abroad what miltech companies have created in Ukraine. Not only my company, but the entire industry, so that the competencies that we have gained can be scaled for dual use. That is not only military design, but also surveillance drones, cargo drones, etc. I believe that Ukrainian specialists, engineers and entrepreneurs are capable of this. Although, I will tell you frankly, half a year ago I did not think so. I thought that my task was to help as much as possible for us to win this war, and when the active hostilities are over, I would return to the business that worked before. Why so? Because it seemed to me that we were not doing something incredibly complex. We were not creating deep tech that would have value abroad. And you know what? This is true. We are not creating some incredible technologies. We are not creating inventions that are highly innovative like the F-35 or Patriot or something like that. But the more I talk to generals of foreign armies, the more I talk to the military and defense ministries of foreign countries, the more I understand that our expertise is very strong. They have something to learn from us, namely how to use relatively simple means to effectively harm an enemy. This expertise that we have is the experience of application, the experience of rapid adaptation of technology, a rapid cycle of innovation. This is the expertise that we can sell abroad. Why sell? Because this is what we got through a lot of blood, a lot of losses, and we have to monetize it for our country because it will be one of the elements of export and potential development. The students who have created the Miltech industry in 2 years, what we have created in 2 to 3 years of active military operations is worth tens of years in developed countries such as the European Union or the United States. Although the United States has its own strong expertise because they are constantly involved in wars. In addition to the fact that European partners should look at Ukrainian companies, they should also look at what changes the Ukrainian state is making. Because if at that time there had been no changes in legislation and codification had not been possible in 3 months instead of 3 years, then nothing would have happened. Now, in Europe, in order to obtain a codification according to the NATO standards, it will take at least 2 years. By the time you get this done, you can throw away your product and start making something new because it will no longer be relevant. That is, we have a lot of expertise in how the state has transformed in the context of state procurement in the Miltech sector. This is also an experience that should be adopted by our European partners, and this can also give a positive result for the development of their industry and sectors.
Позитивний результат для розвитку їх індустрії і сектору.
New military technologies have defined Ukraine's ability to defend itself against the aggression of its much larger neighbor. Maybe none of these has caught the public's eye quite like drones. New Ukrainian drone companies are defining Ukraine's defense. They are also a pillar of an envisioned post-war economy. Europe, meanwhile, is rearming in a way that has not happened since the end of the Cold War. They are increasingly onboarding Ukrainian expertise into their local defense industries. Companies like TAF are not just going to be at the front line of physically defending Ukraine in the east, but also in integrating Ukraine both politically, economically, and certainly militarily with Western neighbors and allies. This gives us a rare opportunity to be at the ground floor of shifts in global defense organizations. If you would like to see more reporting like this, please consider becoming a member by clicking on the link in the description below.